So Tears of the Kingdom came out this week, or was it last week? It came out recently, and the game looks amazing. I haven't bought it yet, but I will get there. I just finished Breath of the Wild last summer, so I'm a little bit behind, but I will get it. Look at the stuff you can build in this game. It looks ridiculous. Tanks and hovercrafts and like machine guns and robots, and it's just, some of the videos coming out from this game look amazing. So I thought to celebrate, I'm going to do a little Link animation. So I've been a fan of Zelda games forever. The first one I got was Link's Awakening. My favorite one is Majora's Mask. That game is dark and weird, and I love it. They need to do a remake. So the animation we're going to do today is based on Toon Link, because he's the best looking Link in my opinion. He's so cool looking, and the design is really fun, the gameplay is fun, the animation is awesome, and the art design is superb. So we are going to base our design around Toon Link today. So yeah, let's start with the design. Here's something I drew earlier. By earlier I mean 3 years ago. I drew it, threw it off my Instagram and forgot about it, and then I went back and thought, okay, I can work with this. So I redesigned my redesign of Link. I made him look more appealing, and I gave him different proportions. His legs a little bit thinner, blah blah blah. It's a slight turnaround. It's only 2 views, but the front 3/4, it's not perfect, but it's good enough for me to start rigging him. So the thing that gets me nervous about rigging my own character is that I think it's done, and then when I start animating him, there's about a million things that are wrong with him. So whenever I'm done, I get a little bit nervous, because I see all the problems with it, and then I spend another day fixing it. And that absolutely happened with this build. But what I want to do for this one is I want to have strong lines of action with this character. Because this is an action shot, I want to have strong lines of action. I want to have strong curves going from the top of the head down to the feet and through the arms. So when I design... I'll wait for this bus to go by. Bye-bye, bus. So when I designed this Link, I designed him with a lack of details. I don't like little wrinkles and like little belts and stuff. I mean, he has belts, obviously, but they aren't jutting out anywhere. But I've kept them simple, and they're really useful to suggest volume to your character and to give it a sense of perspective, to see which way the torso is bending. Yeah, but the main reason I don't like having lots of little details to animate is because that is a pain. It's a massive pain in the bum. So I just make it as simple as possible. Alright, so animation. Yeah, so I started off with a run. It's just a profile run. I do push it eventually to more 3/4 front, kind of, as if he's running towards the camera. But I just wanted to mess around with him to see how the rig worked. Yeah, this scene changes a lot over the course of this episode. He does a run, and then he kind of does a little skippy jump, and then he antics down, and then he jumps and does a flip, and then he pulls out his bow, and then he shoots an arrow, and it's a lot. And it took me a while. Hence why this video is like 28 billion minutes long. But it's worth it. Okay, so here's the first run cycle. Yeah, it's like a standard run cycle, but I want to make it cool. And I want to make it sing. So we're going to go back in, and we're going to start pushing the perspective on the feet and the arms and the legs. And then we're going to add a background. So in this background, I wanted to incorporate the Death Mountain from Link's Awakening with the egg on top. I think that looks really cool, and it's pretty unique. So this background is going to be pretty loose and rough, but I start by drawing rough shapes and filling them in. Yeah, it's going to be a pretty rough, loose background, more of a suggestion of a background. It turns out okay. So I get a perspective plane in there to suggest depth, and I throw a Link in there to see how he would look, and then I start coloring it in. And it's nothing complicated, it's just blocks of color really, with a bit of shading and some trees and the sky and some clouds. So nothing mental, but it turned out alright. Ideally you want to have a background from the beginning, just so you see how the character would look. But I was winging this scene, so Don't take my advice. Nah, jokes. I find foliage really hard to draw. I find it really tricky. Just to you want to get, if you're drawing trees and leaves and that kind of stuff, you're looking for shape and the suggestion of what a tree would be. You don't actually want to draw individual leaves because you'd be there forever. So that's what I did. And now I'm going to start working on Link's sword. So I settled on the Master Sword, obviously. In hindsight, I kind of wish I did the Kokiri sword or something like that. I think that looks cool. I like just plain looking weapons. For some reason I draw a lot of characters. Like any character I draw in my spare time, they always have a gun or a sword or something stupid like that. Yeah, so we draw the Master Sword. I use the Wind Waker Master Sword as reference. By reference, I mean I just copy directly over it. Whatever, it works. By the way, I'm sorry if you hear a bunch of honking or people yelling outside. There's a bunch of drunk people running around, gone mental. Alright, so I attached the sword to Link's hand, and perspective's a little bit weird, but yeah, it's working. That's working, right? And so with the sword attached, I noticed that the hand movements were too much, so I reduced their movement by about 30% maybe, because it is a weighted object, so it would look weird if it was like flapping around like a little cartoony thing. So yeah, here's the run cycle in perspective with a sword, and he's got a background. Okay, this is coming together. So next thing is I'm going to animate him on the x-axis. What's going to happen is the camera's going to be moving with him, so the background's going to be moving away, and Link's going to be coming towards us. So I'm going to copy the run cycle and paste it across. He runs all the way across like that. Alright. It's working. Now I'm going to parallax the background. So parallaxing is when you have different pieces of the background moving at different speeds to give the illusion of depth. It's a really old technique that Disney has started in the 50s, where they had something called a multiplane camera. So they used complicated math formulas to determine how the background, foreground, midground, and characters would move on this plane to simulate a decent representation of depth. Now with Harmony, it's actually a 3D engine with 2D pieces that you move around, so you could simulate depth of field in a real way by sliding the needed pieces closer to the camera, and it will automatically simulate depth for you. I prefer moving them manually just on the one plane, it's just easier. So that's what I'm doing. I have a pretty good sense of what speeds the different background pieces should be moving, and it worked out fine. So I changed the background here. I flipped Death Mountain so it's on the right. I think it looks better, really. That's the only reason, actually. And also because Link, he ends up on the left side of the screen, so originally he was kind of covering it where you can see everything. Yeah, that's fine. Good stuff. So to sell the sense of speed, I added some shrubs in the foreground here, and they're going to move from the foreground to the background and disappear over the horizon line, kind of, and it gives that sense of speed. And then I'm going to start animating his jump. So now I'm starting to animate, and this is where I flip back and forth a lot. There's going to be a lot of jittery movement here, I'm sorry about that, but I'm going to have him antic here. He slows down. As a result, his speed slows down, so he moves back in Z depth, and then he does a little skip and a jump. So I wanted to vary up his movement here. He antics down, he antics, does a little hop and a skip, and then he goes into a jump. The reason why I did that is because I wanted to vary his animation a little bit and keep it interesting. So here I change up his expression to something a bit more serious, and then I'm going to get on the jump bit. So in this pose, I want to make sure there's a really nice strong line of action going from the head to the toes. And then after that, I'll have the limbs dragging a little bit. And that will sell him pushing off from that pose. I'm also going to add some dust effects, so there's going to be kind of smoke coming up behind him. Now I'm going to have him flipping, kind of doing a front flip, so I don't have a back view for Link, and basically I have to make one up on the fly, no pun intended. So I'm going to have to cheat a back view, and I'll have to move all the pieces around to approximate what the back of him would look like. And I get it working, but you know, had I planned this out, it might have been a bit easier. I'm happy with the end result though. So you can see here I'm just pushing the facial features back behind the head, so it looks like looking from the back. And in a minute I'm going to start working on the final pose, which is him pulling back his bow and shooting it. So this pose is going to be held the longest throughout the scene. I want it to look good, and I want to push some perspective, so I'm going to have his front arm, the one that's holding the bow, closest to the camera, and I'm going to really push the perspective there, and have his hand and his forearm looking bigger. Yeah, I think that would look pretty cool. And I want to have this pose looking as stylized and dynamic as possible. So what I'm aiming for in this pose is I want a nice C curve going through the shoulders and the torso down to the legs and the feet, and also from the top of the head down to the toes. And this is heavily edited, but it took me a good hour and a half maybe to get this pose perfect. So it took forever. In total it took about 30 hours to do this shot, and lots of futzing around and clicking on stuff and making my mind up. But that's just how long it takes to do animation, because it's so labor intensive. When I finish a shot now and I'm done everything at home, just my own personal stuff I'm putting on YouTube, to get into the editing mode, it takes a whole another push of energy, because sometimes I'm like, I spent so long on something and now I have to go back into it and I have to look at all my terrible work, and then I have to drone on for like 20 minutes. The motivation can be sapped, but I just think about, you know, what it's going to look like when it's up on YouTube, and that keeps me going. So I finished that last pose, mostly. That's what I'm going for. Fantastic strong C-curve. And yeah, it's looking pretty good. I'm gonna make another mouth now. A sort of clenching, angry mouth. I go through a few designs, but I settle on this one. And then I'm gonna color it. I'm gonna use his mouth when he's jumping, right before he jumps, and maybe just after he takes off. When he's in the air with a bow, I'm going to keep it closed, because it looks cooler. Yeah, so you can see right here I'm starting to put the mouth in, and I think it adds something. And I'm also going to squint this eye a little bit, sort of wincing, winding up for him to use his bow. I also widen his teeth a little bit, because they're a little bit too yellow. Now, one of the things I should have done in the beginning was give him a bow, so I can pose out his last pose with the bow in mind, so I can see how it looks but you know, that's just lack of planning on my part. So at the end, when I add a bow, which I will in a minute, I have to adjust the pose just slightly. It works, but I have to adjust the face a little bit because the string's in the way, but it turns out okay. So I'm going to start drawing his bow now. It is a prop that I will attach to his hand, and the bow design I want to use is it's the same kind of bow from the Link's Awakening remake that came out a couple of years ago. A really simple design. It's just wooden, and it honestly just looks like a bow. So I'm going to draw that out, and I'm going to color it, and then attach it to his hand. So I've attached the bow there, and I'm just messing around with his facial features. I do that a lot. I change stuff up, and if something doesn't work, then I'll just undo it. And right now I'm attaching the bow prop to his back. What I did was I duplicated the bow, and then I have two bows in the shop, and I'm going to attach one to his back, and when he pulls it out from behind him, I'm going to do the old switcheroo, and he's going to pull out the prop. I'm also drawing his shield now. It's really simple design. You're only going to see it from the inside, just the wooden bit. Yeah, pretty straightforward. And that's attached to his back the whole time as well. So right here I'm figuring out when he's going to draw the bow. I figured as soon as he pulls out the bow from behind his back and he pulls it forward, I'm going to have him draw the bow at the same time. I don't have an arrow yet, and I will get that built in a second. So here I'm working out the breakdown for the arrow draw, and I want to give it on a slight arc, nothing crazy. Most of the action is going to be clouded by his overall action of jumping up, so I'm not too bothered. But here I'm just neatening up all the drawings and making sure that the breakdowns are flowing right, and you get a nice upshot there of Link's tunic. and now I'm going to adjust the hair. So with his last pose here, I'm not too bothered about it being a bit tweeny at the end. It looks kind of flashy with that held pose and the hair flapping. As long as the pose is strong, it doesn't matter, as long as it's appealing. We're coming to the end here, and I'm going to add some effects, mostly minor effects, some dust, and I'm going to add a shine to the arrowhead, and then I'll add a glow node effect to that to make it shine to make it seem more shimmery. So I added some dust effects here, and I hand drew it, and I attached an opacity node, and it gives it a little bit of texture and a little bit of quality at the end. And I added some sound effects, so let's take a look at the final render. But before we get there, I want to say I created a Patreon, so if you want to see more dumb little cartoons and me animating them, I have a whole list of ideas I want to animate. Like for the next episode, I want to animate an Indiana Jones type cartoon. That'd be great if you could support me. If not, I hope you enjoyed the video. Links in the description below. And yeah, thanks.